and welcome to today's seminar. I am Beth Mashesky, Senior Scientific Specialist at the Illinois Sustainable Technology Center and Seminar Co-Organizer. Our next seminar will be on October 11th from noon to 1 here at ISTC. It will be on PFAS remediation in the environment, and it will be presented by Matt Simkick from the University of Minnesota. I'd like to remind everyone here to please silence electronic devices as we are recording today's webinar. We will also hold all questions until the end of the seminar so that those online can hear your questions when I bring around the microphone. And then for those online, you can also type in your questions at any time, and we'll answer those at the end as well. And with that, I'm very pleased to welcome today's speaker, John Stier. John is principal at Sustainable Brewing Solutions, and he also serves as the Sustainability Mentor for the Brewers Association. The Brewers Association is a nonprofit trade organization representing 4,500 U.S. craft brewers. John has 35 years of sustainability experience with prior roles as Director of Corporate Environmental Affairs at Anheuser-Busch Companies and also served as Senior Consultant for the Anetti Group. Please join me in welcoming John.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here to share some ideas with you today. Let's keep this pretty casual. Hope you're writing down a lot of ideas to quiz me on later. I think the most important thing is to realize that there's no right way to do this and not a wrong way to do it. So what I'm going to share with you today is a way to do it. I've had 40 years in the brewing industry, 30 with Anheuser-Busch. And when I left in 2008, I hooked up with an international sustainability consulting firm and spent most of my time working with Heineken and Carlsberg overseas on their sustainability platform. A lot of work with Diageo and SAB Miller in Africa and Asia on water supply. So that was a lot of fun. And then as I'm kind of going to the next phases of my career, I've been a home brewer and always loved craft brewing ever since the days when I got to visit some craft brewers when Anheuser-Busch started their selective purchasing of craft brewing. So I thought, I'm going to approach the Brewers Association and just see if there's a way that I can help accelerate sustainability within craft brewing, because it's so rapidly growing, as many of you know, and we need to do this right. We need to grow responsibly, and I think I can share some ideas that maybe would help along the way. So that's what I'm going to try to share with you today. There could be a totally different approach, but I'm going to share with you my approach. I think it works. Doesn't work all the time, but I think it's worked well for me in my career and what I've seen now with other craft brewers over the last 3 years. The big question, that's why I put the title here, is I run into this question all the time. I'm way too busy. Is this a nice to do thing, or is this really very important for me to do as a business imperative? And I'll say 90% of the time I hear, that whole green image kind of thing is great. I'm totally a believer in that, but I'm just way too busy right now. I'll get to it later. And so I'm going to try to do is present an argument that says that waiting till later is waiting too long. You need to start now. So let's talk a little bit about what I'm going to try to cover. Sustainability, you can have 1,000 different definitions, and each of you in this room and online have their own definition. So we're going to play around with some definitions. I'm going to talk about, I'm a data geek. I love putting data to work, and so I want to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about leading and lagging indicators in the brewing industry and what to look for. Talk about some tools that are available to you online through the Brewers Association website. No charge. You can download information that hopefully is helpful to you. I've written now, I think, 5 or 6 technical guidance manuals that you can download on the BA site, and I've tried to do it in a way that's specific to, help you as a craft brewer to get to the next level. I get really frustrated when people, especially craft brewers with little time, are just spending hours and hours and hours Googling on routes that take them in different directions that aren't specific to what they need to do. So hopefully these are useful. And then leave a little room at the end for some questions and answers. Nice introduction. Thank you, Beth. I think my role with the Brewers Association, as you can see, is really three things. It's I convinced them as a data geek that we need to collect information on where the sector is at so that we can understand better how to grow more responsibly. So I'm in charge of soliciting and verifying data for annual benchmarking reports that we put out. We've got 2 published. The third one is in graphics, ready to be published. And the fourth one, I'm starting to play around and verify 2017 calendar year data in preparation for the next report. I assist members. I'm like a hotline. This is the best part of my job is when I get those calls from a craft brewer that says, I've got this problem, you got any ideas? And I'm more than willing, because that's my role with the BA. I'm on a contract basis. I'm not a full-time employee. I live in St. Louis. I don't live in Boulder, Colorado, where the BA is. But I have agreed to spend a few hours a week helping craft brewers, and I probably spend 3-4 times that much just because I love helping you guys out with some issues where I may have some experience to help. And really, it's helping you maybe look at some quick and the low-hanging fruit type of things to get started and get people enthused about, hey, this is a pretty good deal. This is something we should spend some time on. So great job if you can get it. Hope all of you, as you age, can eventually be in that role. I'm having a blast with it. We do have a subcommittee within the Brewers Association. It's made up of 15 people, 3 people from the BA, including myself, and then 12 brewers, everything from a little craft brewer, Worth Brewing in Iowa, to Sierra Nevada and New Belgium. So we've got representation of all sizes on this group. And that subcommittee is really trying to do some things. We've got some, obviously, some statements that we've all agreed to. Number one is we want to brew beer. And we want to not only brew beer, but we want to brew high-quality beer that strengthens the value of the business. But at the same time, we want to increase the ability of agricultural systems, which is obviously your biggest source of supply besides water, to be able to withstand all these new breweries coming in. And we also want to do it in a way that you're an integral part of the community and people want to come to work for you because you're doing the right thing and you're a cool place to work. So that's kind of our marching orders. So let's get to a quick definition of sustainability, and I'm not going to pull out all of the technical world global council definitions because I don't think that's as critical as just trying to look at it this way. There's really 3 things. When you start a business, if you can do it in a way that has economic success, has an environmental focus, and also has a social focus, that's a good thing, right? And so what we see over in history is companies that maybe went out of business and because they were too focused on that economic side and got up and were pushing profitability too hard, especially short-term profitability, didn't work. Went out of business, weren't profitable. Or on the other side, the most environmentally friendly brewery is a brewery that never existed, right? Because now you're not using any resources. So, but that's not a real good solution either because now we don't have good beer to drink and we're not employing people, etc. And then on the other side, on the social side, especially when I spent a lot of time with Heineken and Diageo in Africa and Asia, I mean, the social issues there were number one. I mean, we had child labor issues, we had slave trades, it was incredible what I saw over there. So there had to be, in that case, there had to be more of a social focus. But I think there's a way to combine all 3 of these and just kind of check where you're at and try to stay in that middle, the sweet spot. Don't ignore any of the 3 and try to make it a nice balance. And that, to me, is the most profitable way to go forward and the most responsible way. So that's probably a definition of sustainability that you never heard, but that's my definition or way to look at it. I like this. So somebody asked me, but yeah, but put that into words. And so I call it the perfect pint. How can I produce the highest quality beers in a profitable manner that minimizes the amount of natural resources I use, lessens my environmental footprint? We go to the social side, I want to provide a safe working environment for my employees. You know, a lot of times your employees are your brother, your uncle, it's family. And to put a family member out there where you have high CO2 levels in your fermenter and they're in there screwing around with it and not knowing that this is dangerous, or somebody you're using without machine guarding, getting their hands caught and losing a digit or something else, I mean, that's devastating, regardless of whether it's a relative, any employee, but especially when it's your family that's out there. So we got to make sure that we pay attention to a safe working environment. You want to get the best employees. You're competing for guys that are, that are good and knowing brewing. You want to get those best employees. You want to create value in the community. You don't want to just be, there in the community and nobody likes you. You make too much noise. Or you're providing alcohol to people to get drunk, and that's just not a good setting. You want to protect your supply chain ingredients. Now I know it's a little bit harder as a smaller brewer to think that you could have a role in protecting your ingredients. But there's a lot of work being done on the barley side, on the hop side, et cetera, in this country where, hey, we need to be more sustainable in how we grow these ingredients, or we're going to run out as brewers. And you want to enhance your image as a responsible brewer. You get a little bit of a halo on craft brewing when consumers come in. Oh, craft brewing, they're sustainable, they're green. They're not like the big brewers. Well, you don't want to, you already got kind of an entry card. Don't mess it up. Be responsible, do the right thing. And I really think if you do all these things, it's going to help you sell more beer. So let's peel apart this a little bit, and let's look at those three drivers again. And I made a mistake one of my first times I ever had to present to August Bush III. I made a mistake of presenting the environmental side of the equation first, and he glared at me and stopped me in the middle of the presentation and told me to leave and told me to develop the the financial side of the equation and then come back and see him. And that was a hard lesson that I learned that I've never forgotten. Whether you agree with it or you don't, you're in business to make money. Some of you may not be. Maybe you're nonprofit and all of your profits go back into charitable organizations. That's great. I don't know a whole lot of brewers that are like that. You got to put food on the table for your family and you want to make a profit. So let's talk about economics first. So if you want to be profitable, let's keep this real simple. It's just your revenue minus what you buy, your cost of goods sold, over your revenue as a gross profit margin. And then if you look at your cost of goods sold, it's your raw materials plus your labor plus your overhead. And typically overhead are those things like utilities, electricity, gas, water, wastewater, waste that you have to pay to have BFI or another disposal company come up and pick up at your facility. And so what we're seeing is if we can focus on some of this overhead, then that's a good thing because it's going to build back into that profitability ratio. So how do we do that? Well, the BA does a number, Brewers Association does a number of surveys where brewers submit data on what their costs are. And I pulled that out of this survey, this income statement. These are some typical numbers that craft brewers submit for their costs. So I really want to focus in on that direct overhead that I highlighted. And they're saying it's $70 a barrel. And if you look at $70 per barrel, and then you look at the benchmarking work that we've done with craft brewing, about $70 per barrel, that $26, I could probably say, a third of it or so is tied up in electricity, natural gas, your wastewater fees, how much CO2 you purchase, water, solid waste. So it's not the entire amount, but it's pretty substantial that it's 37% of your overhead costs that are tied up in some of these utilities that also have an impact on the environment. So it's kind of an interesting way to look at it. Now, if your net income is $55 a barrel, and we can figure out a way to add $10 a barrel onto your net income, that's a good thing, right? And if we can figure out a way to do it with spending very little capital, that's even a better thing. All right, so we talked money. So what if a brewery that's going to produce, let's say, 5,000 barrels in 2020 became more efficient and more sustainable compared to others in their size? So let's say we've got a brewery that's operating in the middle of the pack. And I'm afraid to use this because let's say we have a brewery that's operating in the middle of the pack, and they say, I'm satisfied being here. Well, that's okay. That's pretty good. If you're in the middle of the pack, you shouldn't be ashamed of yourself. But what if you got to the top, into the top 20% performers? How much money's on the table? What is it worth to you? And so what we did is we took all of our benchmarking information for each of those utilities, and we figured out that if this brewery at 5,000 barrels moved from the middle of the pack to the top 20%, that they essentially could save or avoid about $36,000 a year in utility costs, which would add about $7 per barrel to that number. Now, I'm sure none of you would turn down the ability to get $7 a barrel. The question I always get is, yeah, but at what cost? And what I want to propose to you and later on in these slides is there's a way to approach this where we can go after some things at no cost to you, no capital cost, and then let's be smart and do a logical way of looking at this a little at a time. So hopefully I've convinced you there's a financial or an economic benefit to doing some things to become more efficient. So let's go to the next part of sustainability, the environmental side. And I'm not downplaying one part of those rings in the Venn diagram versus the other. The environmental side may be the most important to you, and that's okay. But recognize that there's an economic benefit also. So we know that climate change and CO2, man-made greenhouse gases, big deal. We know all about water and severity, maybe not so much, really everywhere, but certainly in California with the drought situations, in Colorado with drought situations, too much water in Carolina right now. And then groundwater and land contamination, kind of the big three here, where if we continue to landfill solid waste materials, that has the potential to contaminate soil and groundwater. So if you look at those three big environmental drivers, and then you say, what if that same brewery that we just talked about, that was producing 5,000 barrels in 2020, became more efficient, moved from the middle of the pack to the top 20%. If they did that, we already said they could add $7 per barrel onto their cost, onto their profitability. What does that mean from an environmental impact statement? So what we've been able to do is calculate that if they did that, there's a certain amount of less fuel they would use, less natural gas, you'd use less electricity, maybe you'd purchase less bulk CO2, you'd use less water, and you produce less solid waste. So if we look at fuel, electricity, and purchased CO2 as being three pretty important parts of greenhouse gas production for a brewer, we could reduce actually about 440,000 tons per year, or pounds, I'm sorry, 440,000 pounds of greenhouse gases. More importantly, especially when you're talking to employees, that's like removing 42 cars off the road. So if we did this project, it'd be like 42 less cars on the road creating greenhouse gases. That's a great thing. On the water side, instead of talking gallons of water reduced, because that's just kind of mind-blowing to a lot of people, you could talk, we use a lot of water. We could actually help, and we could provide 4,800 people with water. That water was going to us now. Instead of having more water come out of a well or more water being treated to supply those 4,800 people, hey, we'll send ours over because we're more efficient. That's great. That's a great story. And same way with solid waste, we could remove 2 households from landfill if we were to reduce the amount of waste that we produce that went to the landfill. So it's kind of using some factors from EPA, some standard factors, just to put it in perspective for the public, employees, etc. So once again, I'm going to stop there for a second, and we've talked about economic drivers. We've talked about environmental drivers. So that's 2 out of the 3 pieces. I mean, hopefully you're seeing some things here that says, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't wait 10 years from now to start on this path because there is something here. But let's look at the last piece of this, and that's the social drivers. So I broke social drivers into employees, consumers, and the community. And so from an employee perspective, you've heard it, you know, the new age group you're trying to attract to bring in as good employees, top talent. It's influenced by a number of factors, obviously pay, you know, there's benefits, there's all sorts of things. But when we look at research that's done on some of these age groups of 21 to 30 or so, we're finding out that sustainability is a huge deal to them. It's very important to them. And they want to work for a company they can be proud to work for and tell their friends that they work there and not be embarrassed to take their friends there because these folks are doing the right thing. And finding those people, getting them engaged in your organization, that's huge, adding to not only the economic side of the equation, because once they leave after a year and you've trained them and invested all that time in them and they hop and go someplace else because they don't feel like you're taking this seriously, you know how expensive it is to lose that person, have to go out and recruit a new one. It's time consuming, it's costly. You want the best people. Consumers, we could spend an hour on research that's been done, and I'm not going to take one side or the other because I was part of the Budweiser brand team for 3 years where we tried to make Budweiser a green marketed brand, and we did focus group after focus group after focus group trying to figure out, will consumers actually pick one brand over another if they knew this one was more sustainable than the other? And it's one of those things where, you know, what do you want to say? And I'll bring the data to support whatever I want to say. I can support either side. So I'm not going to say that this is a given, but I go back to that halo effect. As your consumers come into your brewery, I think there's an expectation that, of course, this is a craft brewer. They're not like those big brewers. They're using water efficiently. They're doing the right thing. You don't want to mess that up. So you want to be able to tell the consumers what you're doing, either on your website or with table tents on your table in your pub, whatever way you choose to do it. But don't be bashful about claiming some of the achievements that you've had. And then finally, community. Man, you want the community to be on your side. You want to say, man, this is the ideal employer. Man, providing good wages. People love to work there. People love to go there to drink beer and socialize. It's awesome to me when I see craft brewers that go into a brownfield area and actually start to be part of that community and revitalize. I've seen breweries put in new facility or renovate old buildings in places where I'm afraid to go to. And you know what happens? Next thing you know, somebody else pops up right next to them because they're doing so well there. And then somebody else pops up right next to them. And you've got this revitalization thing happening. It's incredible with beer, maybe it's spirits too, but with beer especially, you know, people like to go there and just socialize and talk. And you want to be known as that kind of a community person that would be able to help out and be part of that community. So let's do our what ifs again, our fictitious 5,000 barrel brewery. What if this same brewery at the same time, you know, found that sweet spot in the middle and said, I want to spend some time on the social aspects. And I just pulled out a couple of articles here that I thought were pretty good. You know, up here in the look, there's a group called Cone Communications. I've always thought they were pretty reputable and do a pretty good job of research. And this says a new report reveals 86% of U.S. consumers expect companies to act on social and environmental issues. Okay, we talked about community. Community engagement is not about being nice. It's the fourth pillar. It's an important integral part to think of community. I love this one, employee engagement survey study. You can go online on Cone Communications and download any of these reports for free. They're awesome. There's some really good stuff in there. But it says things like, you know, 75% of employees want to work for a company that have set goals and commitments around sustainability. That's pretty powerful. That's telling us that this has some merit on the social side to get involved. So once again, we got these three little circles of influence. Do we spend all of our time on one or another? No, you kind of look at that sweet spot in the middle and do a little bit on each to be able to start on this path. Yeah, so where do I start? Great questions. You know, the first thing usually is, hey, local utility said that they would do a free energy audit for me. I had them come in. They said, replace all the lighting, put some new motors and fans in, and we'll pay for part of it. Is that where I start? Maybe. Hey, never pass up anything free. If you can get free energy audit, doesn't hurt to get it, see what it says. But I think there's a little bit more, a little better way of maybe attacking this. In the same way, when you started a brewery, would you go to the bank and say, I want a loan because I want to start a new brewery? Well, where's your business plan? Well, I don't have one. I don't think you're going to get that loan. And the same way, why should this be any different? Why can't we create a plan of attack around sustainability that starts with data? And then I really believe that when it gets measured, it gets improved. It's an old adage, but man, it really stands the test of time. So let's start with data collection. You know, I go back to monthly. I'm just stuck on monthly. And I'm going to go back to what I said at the very beginning. This is not the right way to do it. You must do it this way. I'm just giving you my perception on what's worked and what I felt has worked over the years. But when you have a purchasing person get a bill from a utility, usually on a monthly basis, and they're looking at that bill and they're writing out a check to pay that bill, why not take, at that time, 2 seconds and record the usage off of that bill and the cost and put it into some kind of a data collection system, right? I don't care if you use a spreadsheet. I don't care if you use sticky notes, whatever is good for you, but at least get it. What really frustrates me is when you have an accountant get all this information, pay the bill, new bill comes in, I shred the old bill because I don't want my file folders too thick. I put the new bill in and on I go. You know, how far back should you go back and do that? You know, as with any good researcher, right? More data, the more the better. Go back 20 years if you can. You know, at least 2 years is important because I think I want to compare month to month from one year to the next. If I just have 1 year, I don't know if that's an anomaly yet or not. It's going to take me a whole year to understand whether or not the month I have this month is odd or whether or not it's okay. It's kind of in that smooth zone. So 2 years going back, and we've got a tool within the BA. It's a free tool. The BA members. Some of you may not be BA members. That's okay. I'll send you this. I'll send you the spreadsheet. You can put it in a spreadsheet I use. But for God's sake, start collecting data and seeing where you're at. Here's kind of the tool if you went online. Right now what's really cool is I've got over 300 craft brewers in there. And so I can go on my laptop and I can pull down any of the 300 craft brewers, pull up all their raw data, get on the phone with them and say, hey, your water usage is going through the roof. Do you know that? What's going on? And we have these good conversations, or better yet, when they call me and say, can you pull up my data and let's look at it together. Love doing that kind of stuff. You can create some dashboards off of this tool where we do comparisons. So the ultimate question is, when I first started this, a craft brewer would say, okay, I did what you said, I collected all my data, and here's where I'm at. We're going to normalize it over barrels, so I know how many kilowatt hours per barrel I have of electricity. I know how many barrels per barrel of water I'm using, but I don't know if I suck or whether or not I should be, you know, ordering cake and having a big celebration because I'm great. And so this view allows them, based upon, you know, size ranges, so you're not comparing a 500 barrel brewery to Sierra Nevada. It's not fair. Let's compare a 500 barrel brewery to another 500 barrel brewery. And they can see where their dot is. You can see the little red arrow and the little yellow dot. So we have two charts. We have some scatter plots of usage, and then we have some scatter plots of costs. So in this particular case, this particular brewery on fuel, our natural gas usage, is using 3.2 therms per barrel. That puts them right there. Now, I get two reactions. Your data's wrong. That can't be right. I'm doing everything. I know I'm doing everything on fuel usage reduction. I can't be in the bottom 25%. Well, let's look at your data again. Nope, you're in the bottom 25%. So I either lose them and say, this is all wrong, I'm out of here, or I hear, okay, well, what are these other people doing? How do I get maybe to the middle of the pack? What do I have to do different? And that's a great discussion to have. And we can't look at this without looking at how much money's on the table. So when I tell them, well, you know what, on fuel right now, you're spending $3 a barrel on your natural gas. Everybody else in your size range, the median is $1.53. So when you go out to sell your beer against a competitor, you're $1.50 in the hole already. That's not a good thing. I would like to put that $1.50 a barrel back on your profit rather than on paying natural gas bills. And that sometimes that convinces people, sometimes it doesn't. So who's participating? I said 300. I did it by state. I've actually got some really cool ones. I got Scotland and Australia and Chile and Canada's getting bombarded with a lot of Canadian breweries right now. Colorado did something with the local state Department of Environmental Health, Public Protection. State environmental agency stood up and said, man, this is a great idea. We'll help you go out there and collect data and do assessments with you. And everybody in Colorado kind of jumped on that bandwagon, which is why they're so high. Let's see, Illinois, not bad, but that was because my buddy Ian Hughes, who works with me at the BA, was actually up at Oak Brook, is it, that with the Sustainability Center. So he was out beating on doors and doing some presentations at Brewers Guild. So we got quite a few. So let me go back to the title. Is this a nice to do or a business imperative? Here's what I've heard some brewers say, and whenever I hear some stuff, I'll write it down because I think it's good stuff. First of all, I hear somebody say, you know, I believe operating efficiently, responsibly will keep us profitable a long time. We're not in this for a year and then we're bailing. You know, we want to be in this for 15 years. I had a discussion yesterday. 15-year payback's fine because I don't plan on going anywhere. I'm not gonna bail on this in 6 months. I'm not in for a short-term gain and run. I've never tracked our utility billings. We just pay them. But you know what? After I entered the data, I noticed some billing errors. I went back to the utility. We got $20,000 in refund. I just got another one yesterday from San Diego, a brewer in San Diego that said, hey, John, I just wanted to let you know, I went back to the electric company in San Diego. They screwed up our billing. I got $15,000 back. It's like, man, that's great. There's nothing. It didn't cost you anything. My employees are thoroughly engaged and excited that this is an environmental initiative that actually saves us some money, too. And we're seeing some lower utility billings, and yet we haven't had to spend any capital yet. I mean, those are great things to hear. In fairness, I hear these things. I'm really not interested. I already recycle. I'm putting even more recycling bins out. I've done everything I need to do. Case closed. I don't even want to talk. I don't have money for solar panels, so I don't even want to talk to you. Well, I never said you had to put in solar panels, but that all I have to do is collect data, but the initial reaction is, no, I don't have money for solar panels. You know, I don't care how inefficient I operate right now. I just need to make more beer and get it out the door and satisfy because I don't want to lose shelf space. I'll worry about efficiency later. Okay? Any capital I have, I need to invest in production equipment, not efficiency improvements. Sustainability, hey, that didn't help me sell any more beer. And that sounds too good. That sounds good. I totally agree with you. man, I am here at 4 in the morning. I'm working till 11:30 at night. My wife's about ready to divorce me. Call me later, because I just don't have time for this. I get it. I'm not being critical of these excuses. They're all legit excuses. But that's the decision you all are going to have to make is this a business imperative, or is this something that you can put off? I like to do a lot of scenario planning with breweries. I'll sit down. Some of the dashboards we have on the website I don't think are as effective as they can be, and I can't get our third-party programmers to do some really cool stuff I want to do. So I do it in Excel. I do some scenario plans. And I wanted to share with you putting data to work. So here's a fictitious brewery I just pulled out. And I said, you know, let's say I'm looking at electricity and I collect all my data, and I'm at 33 kilowatt hours per barrel is where I'm at right today. So if I want to continue business as usual, then I'm going to continue to spend $236,000 on electric bills unless the utility raises their rates, and I'll spend a little bit more. But if I want to keep that, if I just went to the middle of the pack at 25 kilowatt hours per barrel, my annual cost would be $180,000, so I could save $56,000 a year and offset 519,000 pounds of greenhouse gases. Or if I wanted to break into that elite performing group, the top 25%, I'd be at 21. I'd spend 150,000. I could save 85,000 and have that much. So it allows us to do a little scenario planning, some what ifs. Well, what if I don't want to go to that low? What if I just want to go from 33 to 30 kilowatt hours per barrel? What would that mean in terms of economic incentives and also in greenhouse gas reductions? So we play around with these a lot. I've probably done them for, oh gosh, maybe 80 different breweries. I just finished one this morning for a brewery in Wisconsin, and he was all excited because he never really thought about it that way. He's looking at the data now and going, man, I want to do something here, which is great. And then once we set those targets and goals, we put together a 3-year plan. In year 1, it's all about managing to the data. Let's just look at the data. Let's not run out and spend money. Let's just look at the data. I mean, obviously, if there's some no or very low capital projects that could be done up front, yeah, obviously go, especially if they have incentives or whatever from a utility. But let's focus on data in year 1, and let's just get the employees aware that we have set a target. You're an integral part to help us meet that target. So if you're walking through the warehouse and all the lights are on, turn them off, because you know that that's important to help us meet the target. It doesn't cost you anything. And then year 2, now let's go look at technology. And since we're in the technology center here, I don't want to say that you're not important in year 1, but in year 2 you're really important, because now we're looking at all those things, those technology innovations that are lower capital, that you can maybe do to offset some of your, or improve some of your efficiencies, especially where you have rebates and incentives available. And then year 3, let's start looking at technology with a greater than a 24-month payback period. You know, look a little bit longer term. So it's more of a methodical approach to looking at sustainability than just saying, well, I had an energy audit, I need to do this. You know, whatever approach you would take. I think this makes a lot of sense to me. And I want to talk real quick about year 1, because year 1, I think this is where you get excited, because if you can actually make some gains and you're saying, hey, that guy was right. We actually did make some gains without spending capital. I want to talk a little bit on the brewing side about leading and lagging indicators. And you've all heard the term, right? You want to be more on the leading side because then you can do something about it. But you need to look at those key points in the brewery that says, hey, you know what? When this happens, it's indicating that this might happen. So I better maybe fix this or do something about this now, because this could happen later on, and it has an impact. So if you look at what most craft brewers do today, it's annual budgeting. Each fall, hey, it's fall. How much money do we spend last year? Let's get our utility bills. What did we spend on utilities? Oh, we spent $150,000. Oh my gosh, we only budgeted $100,000. $125,000. Let's bump that up to $175,000 this year because, we get a little bit of cushion. We want to stay within budget, and the utility may raise their rate. So it's that constant chasing your tail, setting a budget higher than what you just spent, and doing it on an annual basis. That, to me, is the worst lagging indicator you can have. But unfortunately, I would say most craft brewers are doing it that way. So out-of-spec performance, excessive costs, you never know about them. You're just paying a bill. And as long as you're within that annual budget, woo, let's have a party. We stayed within budget this year. We did great. Did you? Not sure. If we at least went from an annual, taking a look at it on an annual basis to at least a monthly basis when you get that utility bill, because it's a reminder that, oh yeah, we have to pay that, I should do something to log some data that may be helpful for me, then basically allows you to start tracking against targets and start asking why. So if this month the utility bills come in and you look at your electricity or your water usage, and let's say your water usage is 10 barrels of water for every barrel of beer. And last year at this month, you were using 6 barrels of water. Somebody should ask, why is that happening? Or last month, maybe you were using 5 barrels per barrel. Well, there's a number of things you can look for. It could be just your brewing cycle, that when you brew and when you package. It could be some anomaly like that. It could be weather related. It could be a number of things. But unless you at least look at it and ask the question, I wonder why that happened, and get some people to chime in, get your employees to be involved in that. I was actually involved with a brewery in St. Louis where we sat down with their weekly brew meeting, and I presented their stuff to them. And it was awesome because the 3 or 4 brewers and some of the maintenance people were like, you know what? Remember when we had that quality problem last month? Did anybody go back and check the air compressor and make sure that we turned it back down? Because remember we thought we weren't getting enough air pressure on some of those valves, and so we turned it up. Did anybody go back and turn that down? And as I mentioned yesterday on a brewery visit, we walked down and looked at the air compressor, and there was like a Sharpie. There's like 6 Sharpie marks. And a Sharpie was up here like 120 pounds per square inch on the air compressor. Somebody had turned it there when they had the quality problem, put a new Sharpie, that's the new normal. And then that had nothing to do with the quality problem. They solved it for some other reason, but nobody went back and turned that air compressor back down to 90 pounds. And so unless you ask that question, you're going to be running and spending a lot of money on electricity that's not going to your profit. And so we have some dashboard charts in the database that look at, where were we last year, how are we doing against target each month. Just ask the question. It could be a 1-minute discussion at the beginning of the meeting. How are we looking this month? Here's some charts. Post them in your employee area. Post them in some area. Get people excited that, what, this month we did awesome. We beat target this month. Let's celebrate. I've actually had a number of breweries say, monthly's too long. I want to put sub-meters everywhere. And I'm like, no, please don't put sub-meters everywhere. Number one, you're going to have a full-time instrument technician constantly calibrating them because it's just, they do go out of calibration. But what about if we looked at routine inspections? What about a simple log sheet where somebody's walking around and looking at the compressed air, looking for steam leaks, looking for hot water leaks? We talked about condensate return, really important to the efficient operation of a boiler. If you're not bringing back condensate to a boiler and you have to make up water, then something's happened to that steam that you're not aware of. It's leaking somewhere. You may not hear it, but it's out there, it's leaking, so you better go figure it out. These are all things that you can do without capital. So as those are the more predictive, moving towards more leading predictives, chillers, really big source of electricity. Taking a look at some of those meters and just tracking those on a regular basis. Here's some of the resources. Go online. These are the 5 of the manuals that I wrote that hopefully will be helpful for you. No cost. Just download them as PDFs. There's stuff in there I actually had a buddy of mine that was head of corporate engineering at utilities engineering at Anheuser-Busch, and he put together some awesome checklists and other types of things around lighting and insulation, and yeah, it's just some really good stuff that's from a person that's been doing this all their life in a brewery. Setting targets and goals, we talked a little bit about the benchmarking report. You can download these. There'll be another one out here hopefully in the next couple weeks. I was told by the graphics team at the BA that they had this little event called GABF that they were more focused on today and this week, that they couldn't get that out. These are some of the charts that are in the, comparing yourself in that middle, top, bottom 25%. Give you a lot of data to compare yourself. I only want to look at brewers in the Midwest, see how I do that. I only want to look at brewers in this size. I only want to look, blah, blah, blah. I want to look at brew pubs. You can slice and dice it and look at it. What are others paying? Some great charts in there around, cost structure of what others are paying for their utilities. So I kind of get to the point where I'm leaving it to you. Hopefully I did a good job of convincing you that there's some value here and spending some time on it. I know everyone's busy. I get it. But I think there's some, I have to ask the question, can you afford not to participate and get involved in this because of the financial benefits we went through, because of the environmental benefits, and then lastly, and just as important, some of the social benefits that you get out of it, community employees. So you can literally go online and sign up to have access. You'll eventually get to a screen that says participate now. You click on that, put in your name, your email. It goes to the IT people. They send you a username and password because this is all confidential. Brewers do not really want to have another competitor see their cost structure or see their usage rate. So you just see those scatter plots. You don't see, oh, that's so-and-so, or that's so-and-so. No one knows who you are. They don't know who you are. So it's all confidential. If you don't want to do that, and you're just ready to just call me and say, hey, send me that spreadsheet. I want to work through that with you. Give me a call. So there's my email address. If you go on the BA website, it'll have the same information. If you don't want to write this down, I think you're sending out the PDF after the slides after this, so you'll have a copy of it. But hey, this is my job. I love to do it. I'd love to help you become more sustainable. So please give me a holler. So with that, we're going to see if we have any questions.
We'll take a couple from the audience here.
Okay. A question about wastewater. Can you give some examples of things that brewers can do to minimize their wastewater? And as a part of that question also, let's say I was going to open a brewery in a location where it's on a septic system. What sort of things do you have to do?
Find another location. No, just kidding. So a couple good questions on wastewater. Wastewater is probably taking 80% of my time up right now with questions. Simply because craft brewers typically are paying just like you would at a household. You're paying a certain percentage of the water consumption bill, and it's relatively cheap, which is a good thing. But inevitably, it's a good thing to reduce your wastewater. And think of wastewater in two ways. One is the flow of wastewater, just the liquid volume, the hydraulic part of it, and the other part is the organic part of it and the solids part. So it's the characteristics of the wastewater and then the flow. Most municipalities and most places where you'd be on a septic system, flow is not an issue, right? It is what it is. What's the killer is especially the organic and the solids, particularly organic amount. And if you can figure out a way, well, obviously if you put a program in place to reduce your water usage, less water in, less water out, that's a good thing. But that's only hydraulic. And that's not where you get the most bang for the buck. You're going to get the most bang from the buck if you can figure out a way to look for those small volume but extremely high BOD and total suspended solids waste streams. So It'd be things like hot break tube, cold break tube. When you empty your fermenters out, that final rinse before you go to CIP, just that yeast, that spent yeast that's coming out, and it usually just drips out of that, out of the fermenter into the floor grate that's right below it. Those are the killers. Those are what cost a lot of money to treat, because you could not discharge that directly to a river or a stream, because it would deplete the oxygen in that stream immediately, because it's brewery wastewater is incredibly high in organic strength, which means that municipalities are very careful about how to treat that, because they're taking on a big load. A lot of times a small brewery could be the equivalent of like 20,000 household units, the equivalent BOD in solids. Not flow, but the equivalent BOD in solids part. So if you can figure out a way to reduce that BOD in solids without having to spend a lot of capital on some pre-treatment wastewater system, that's the key. And if you go to the wastewater manual on the, there's a water and wastewater manual, and I had so many questions on wastewater, I wrote another manual just on wastewater. Look at that and look at something called side streaming. And I learned a lot from Bell's up in Michigan, where they collected all of that. And they either mixed it back in with spent grain, or I'm finding some really innovative ways that people are taking that high strength material and figuring out more beneficial reuse of it rather than just letting it go to drain. So that'd be, and I was not really kidding about septic tanks. Septic tanks just can't handle brewery waste. It's just, you'd have to have such a huge leach field to be able to take care of those BOD and solid loadings. That I was working with a guy in Texas on a septic tank, and he essentially went out of business. He couldn't do it. So hopefully that helps.
We have a question back here.
Hi, I'm just curious about where you find since you're on a national level or even international, where do you have a database that you go to with incentives state by state for the technologies on energy efficiency and renewable energies?
Well, obviously we have links in our materials back to the bigger sources of it, whether it's DOE or EPA, kind of point you back to those.
I can actually answer that question.
Go ahead.
There's something called the Desire DSIRE.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Those
what I
are
was going to
incentives.
lead you to. Is the Desire website is a really great website.
My only caution is make sure you spell it right,
Exactly.
because you can get yourself in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, you don't want to
Google.
go down that rabbit hole.
No, but that's a great website for incentives. I thought you were talking more of what technically do I do, what technologies are out there, and so they go hand in hand. But that is a good one.
Do we have any online questions?
Yes. We have several.
Let me get the microphone over there.
Okay. First question is, can you explain a little more about the not being about being nice part?
Well, I think it's a nice to do, is maybe what we're referring to. And so there's some things in life that you have to do, pay taxes. And there's some things that are nice to do. I really want to clean out my garage, but I'm not looking forward to it, and I just don't have time right now. So when I said nice to do, I think what a lot of brewers are telling me is, I kind of get that I should do this, but that's kind of a nice thing to do. For those people, for those other brewers that have, those tree huggers that just want to do some green things, that's for those guys. It's not for me. It's just, if I get some time, that'd be nice to do, but no, it's not a priority.
And then I'm assuming the BA Sustainability Dashboard is voluntary. What's your take on whether it's representative of the industry? It seems like it may be skewed toward the more sustainability-minded breweries, so the bottom 25% would really mean something like the bottom 25% of the top 60%.
Well, that's a good question. Even more reason for more breweries to participate, so we can become more representative of the whole industry. I've been contacted by a number of research companies that want to use our data to calculate the total amount of water that the brewing sector uses as a whole. And so they want to use our numbers that way. And I'm cautioning them, don't do that. Because for the exact reason this question addresses, I'm not totally sure how representative it is. But I spend enough time in breweries to know that when I see numbers like 25 or 30 or 40 barrel per barrel of water use, that I'm probably getting people that are in the bottom. I don't expect that to be, you know, the top 25% of the whole population. So I think it's, you know, more's better. But I'm not worried at all about that this isn't representative. And let's go back to what the purpose of the data is. The purpose of the data is I've identified maybe 10 or 15 breweries that are operating in that top 25%. Who are these guys and what the heck are they doing to do that? And we have a list in the document. Hey, here are the breweries, call them. And if you don't know anybody there, call me and I'll hook you up with the person. You can have a conversation and just say, what are you doing?
The last question, I missed the first 20 minutes of the presentation. Did the speaker talk about Mura mash as an option to reduce costs but increase the amount of beer produced?
No, we really didn't get into any specifics like that. Like I was really focusing more on kind of a convincing argument to say, you know, look at this. And number one, start with data before you jump to new technology as your solution. Not to say that, you know, doing a different mash process, I know spent a lot of time talking to Alaskan brewery where they have to do things just simply because they're in Alaska and they do some cool things with mash. They gasify and use all their spent grain for fuel because they have to. And they're in Alaska. They're in the middle of nowhere. So there are some cool things you could do. But before you go down that path, unless you're just a technology nerd, I'd highly recommend that you maybe follow a little more methodical process of looking where you're at today and doing some scenario planning.
We're coming up on the hour mark. Is there one last question in the audience here? Yeah.
Are the Cardinals going to make the playoffs?
Well, good question. They should, but I'm worried. Yeah, I know. I'm got to be careful. The Cubs will finish in first place. You can mark my name.
So what's the typical TDS of the water, the wastewater, and what are the different things people are using to lower that number?
For water and wastewater? Yeah. We talked a little bit about you know, water usage, and let's go back to the beginning. You know, the easiest thing with water usage, see where you're at today. You know, see how you compare to others, and then say, well, let's set a target, and let's be aware that when, you know, you're using that hose. I do it at home, so I'm not gonna be criticized a brewer, but when I see a brewer walking around a cellar with a hose blasting, cleaning the floors and chasing one piece of grain forever because it's like I'm not going to let this piece of grain get me. I don't want to bend over and pick it up, but I'm going to eventually get it to the drain, and it's hot water. That's not good. That's not a good use of water. And so if we can just build some awareness around that underwater, obviously, you know, as far as reducing water beyond that, I've seen some really, really cool ways to recycle and reuse water, almost to the point now where, you know, we're getting into the extremes of, you know, some of the people that are trying to brew with, quote, you know, toilet to tap kind of a concept, which is always amazes me because heck, goes in a river and you clean it up, it's the same thing, but it's not acceptable to recycle at the brewery. You know, keep sanitary separated from processed water. Try to recycle and reuse that for first flush cleanings. You know, all the things. I got a ton of things in the guidance manual that are on water reduction, a checklist of all the things you can look at to reduce water. That's going to reduce wastewater too.
We are at the hour mark, so I'll officially close seminar. If we missed your question, feel free to contact John with his information that's on the screen right now. So I'll thank John again for his presentation.